You are listening to That Hoarder Overcome Compulsive Hoarding. I don't talk in real life about having hoarding disorder, so I talk about it on this podcast instead. And because I'm anonymous, I can talk really, really honestly. Subscribe to the podcast and find my social media links, episode transcripts, and every link that I mention at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk. Finally, I am not a doctor. I'm just a hoarder doing her best. So do seek professional support if and when you need it. So I am here with Jasmine Sleigh, the author of Being Owned, A Decade in Professional Decluttering. She's been a professional declutterer since 2013 and is based in Devon with her company Change Your Space. Jasmine, you may remember from episode 110. And there was one part of that conversation where we talked about how nearly always when we worry about regretting getting rid of things, what in fact is much more likely to happen is that we experience absolute joy in finding something in the stuff that eclipses any sense of fear or worry at what we've let go. And that is a conversation that not only I come back to in my own head a lot, but that I hear from listeners really resonated. So, Jasmine, how are you?
I'm really well. I'm so heartened to hear that as well. That's we see it in the lives of our clients, but it makes my heart sing when you say it, reassures you each time. It's one of the great things of engaging with our stuff, isn't it? Is the hidden treasures.
Absolutely. So today, what Jasmine and I are talking about is that scary first step of inviting in professional help. We're going to talk about how people get the bravery to do that and what might happen when they do. So taking those first steps, asking for professional help, can be a terrifying thing for some people. What, in your experience, tends to prompt somebody to make that initial call? Is it a kind of end of their tether or crisis situation, or what generally makes someone get in touch?
I normally find that people have been sitting on, I had a phone call this morning and somebody said, I'd saved your page about 4 months ago, and that, I've been thinking about it. Sometimes, I had somebody, I've had your business card for 6 years, and it's usually something actually relatively minor, if you like. It's not a big crisis, but a minor that will happen that tips the point where the difficulty of imagining somebody coming over, maybe to the house, to the home, the inconvenience of the thing that's happened starts to outweigh the pain of having somebody at the door. So, we've had people who've accidentally put something in the bin that they didn't mean to, or can't find something really important to them, or somebody has had to come to the door to do a gas check or something like that, and they've realized that it's just causing them so much anxiety and stress that they need to address it so they don't have to face that again. And that's usually the tipping point, and they make the call to me.
Yeah, I have an annual gas service crisis. But yeah, it sounds like it's not necessarily a huge crisis situation, but that one final straw that on its own might not seem that much.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just the final, I cannot do this anymore.
Yeah, and often I would say a deeply practical one, so that's the engine, if you like, for making the call. So that's a good thing. Normally I get to hear about that first, but then the context of the fact that there's lots of things leading up to that moment. But certainly, yeah, it's usually, as you say, just that straw, the straw that breaks the camel's back, that I can't do this again, or I can't lose that thing again. I need to actually make the call. And even at that point where people are making the call, they perhaps haven't visualized what it would be like to have me come round. And I know this, to take the conversation exactly as it is without rushing too far forward into, well, we can do this, we can do that. absolutely meet them where they are and have the conversation with what they're able to talk about at that point. There will be a point of that conversation which is about, and how would you feel about me coming? Now we've had a little bit of conversation, you've got a sense of me. How do you feel about me coming over? And just testing the waters.
I am in awe of people who are brave enough to make that call to a professional organizer to ask for some help. Having done this job for years, do you still feel that same admiration as I do when somebody reaches out to you?
Absolutely, absolutely. And there are a couple of things I always have in my mind when I'm making the calls. I mean, you would expect this anyway, but I must always be sat at my desk in a good place, a cup of tea, just making sure that person is my complete focus, for the duration of that conversation. Try not to be too hungry, need the loo. It's because empathy takes a lot of energy, and it's important to tune into what words somebody's using. We've talked about this before, but there's sort of they can't see my face at that point, but the tone of the voice and the things that you kind of pinch when you're worried about something else, we're very tuned to it. And especially people who are quite fearful, they're looking for those danger signs early doors in what I'm saying. It is, a huge privilege when people take the time to call. They are stepping well and truly out of their comfort zone, to have a conversation with me. And for some people, they want to get a good long conversation in, give me all the information. Some people are quite cautious, and I have to just find them as they are in that moment and give them the space to go as far in that conversation as they want to go.
And it sounds like you don't want to be having that conversation and then them hear the Tesco announcements in the background. They need to know that you're listening and that they will be, like you say, looking for little signs of, does she get it, or does she maybe not understand what I'm dealing with? And they'll be looking for little clues, like you say, like in your inflections, in the tone of your voice, as well as the words you use, for whether you sound a bit judgy or a bit dismissive or a bit, all of those things. So I guess you take extra effort with those things because you're not judgy or dismissive, but you need that to be portrayed.
And also making sure that I'm asking the right questions or giving the right bit of information. I mean, that sounds contrived, but I don't sit here with a script for the clients. I have to hear what they're saying. Obviously, the experience that I've got is helpful. And in that conversation, I suppose the balance of being reassuring that they're in safe hands. And being in safe hands doesn't mean, oh, you should see the place I went to yesterday, none of that gossip sort of stuff. Not, oh yeah, we've done thousands of, it's not that reassuring. I understand what you're saying. But also reassurance, but also maybe stepping into that world where you ask the questions that acknowledge that there might be more, it might be more painful than they're even saying. So what I'm trying to say is it's not a sales patter where we go, yes, it'll be fine. We'll make it easy for you. It's like reassuring you're in safe hands, but also it might be this sort of thing you're worried about, or maybe these sort of things you might be worried about. And I need to get an understanding where their barriers are going to be. I mean, obviously, even more so when we're in person, just understand where the limits are, as long as they feel safe that I'm not pushing them too far. So it does acknowledge the fact that we understand. So take, for example, I had a conversation a little while ago with somebody with OCD, and, really understanding where they were with what they found difficult. And they were so reassured by the fact that I was asking, what about these sort of things and these sort of things? And as I was saying it out loud, I thought, well, I could be adding things to their worries. But no, I thought, no, it's important that I ask those bits rather than stumble into it accidentally. And that was really fruitful. Not being afraid of the fact that, yeah, this is not going to be an easy process for you, and not be glib about it, but to to hear what they might find specifically difficult.
And it sounds like, as well as on that initial call, trying to demonstrate your values in what you say and how you say it, and also respecting how much somebody wants to tell you at that stage, you will also presumably have bits of information that you're trying to glean to work out if you're the right person to help them, or if or what the next steps might be. So what kind of things do you need to know by the end of that call, for instance?
I suppose I need, one of the crucial things my mind goes to is the fact that I want to understand if they've got a positive vision of what they would like to see different. If somebody shamed them into doing this project, or they've been coerced into doing it, or it's not going to be a good starting point. Or even if they themselves are not quite convinced, like that they feel this, that the visit might be the only thing. And I said, obviously, we're going to meet people wherever they are and be comfortable. But it's quite useful to keep an anchor into the positive thing they would like to see different, because we're all very much more motivated by the carrot rather than the stick. Yeah. And because I know that there's going to be tough times coming, because the process, like I say, it's not great sales patter, is it? I know the process is going to be tricky, but acknowledging that, having that out in the open, obviously my secret hope is not going to be as bad as they think it is, and by being honest that way, it doesn't put them off. But keeping the eye on the prize, what they would like to be different for them, and even if it's a very specific small thing, that's the thing I'm going to keep coming back to. So I want to have that, but also I want to have a view, if they've got a small understanding of what the work, if you like it, the process is going to entail for them. Because obviously I do meet people who then do have a clear vision of how they would like things to be different for themselves in their home, but the work is going to be so painful that we almost have to start further back before we're going to get anywhere near talking about practical sessions for them. So we try and get into a conversation that's a little, without getting into every bit, because I'm not in their home. I don't know what sort of practical things we're going to be doing yet, but a little bit of an example of something that is in their home and how they feel about it. If we've got not able to touch, not able to do, not able to go near, then I know that we have to start at a very different sort of position when I tap on the door. So yeah, I want to get an understanding of their reality of knowing how they're going to be with the process, and also that vision of what's going to be positive for them at the end. Sounds, but as an end result, if you like, of the process for them.
So, on that initial call, when you're getting these bits of information and insight into the person you're talking with, how much information are you trying to get about things like how full their home actually is? Are you trying to assess that over the phone, or is that something you leave till the first meeting?
I mean, there are some things I like to ascertain before a visit if I can. I mean, obviously, try and ascertain risks and things like that as well. It's a balancing act of asking enough questions to make sure, the first meeting goes as successful as possible, without feeling like here's a list of possible things that might be problematic with your home that I need to be aware of first. So, I have a few things that I like to just ascertain, pets and things like that. But not because I think there's going to be a dangerous dog at the door. Sometimes it's because there's a house cat that's important that I get in and close the door before the house cat goes out.
Yeah,
Because nothing destroys a relationship more than if I've lost their cat in the first
yeah, it's not a
time.
great intro, is it?
It hasn't happened. I should say that. Sounds like it's happened to me. But, again, just acknowledging there's something that they want that's particular to them, and I'm going to honour it. It's that first test bed of listening to the sort of requirements you have in your own home, but also a test bed of I'm a person coming to your home. It's useful for you to know what's going to make me a little bit safer and not have the dog getting very annoyed with me if I'm trying to pass the dog when I arrived. Yeah, so there's definitely things that I would try and ascertain. How full somebody's home is, I will usually ask a question that's about something specific. I mean, sometimes it's the specific thing that they've named that's caused them to call me. What sort of happened in the last week that's led you to make the call? That's very telling, usually, that tale. But what sort of things are you finding challenging about your home? Again, I'm hoping that language is suitably, there's a reason why you're calling the service in, but not what's disastrous for you, just what's challenging for you. And that usually leads to some insights to how full the home is. But by and large, I don't put much stock on people having a good sense. I don't know, good sense is not the word. Accurate. And again, I even don't like that word.
Yeah.
And how full a home actually doesn't bother me. Again, it's about how they're able to function in the home. So I suppose I don't really, it's of no interest to me whether it's full to the rafters or there's very little around. I want to understand what they can and can't do in the home. And that's what we're there to work with them on. And actually, I think any questions about volume does tend to presume a certain amount of judgment anyway. And most of the clients don't, they're used to living in their spaces. So, lots of us live with lots of stuff. It just depends how much space you've got and whether the cupboards are working sometimes. So I don't tend to get into the volume side, just what they're finding difficult to achieve in their home that's limiting their well-being in some way. That's why they've called the service.
And imagine some people call and within the first 30 seconds say, I can't get in my bedroom, I can't do, kind of lay out how things are quite literally. And other people, it's a lot more about how it feels and what it prevents. And I think you're right. It's very hard, if not impossible, to give an objective representation of how full your home is, especially if you hoard and therefore have a unusual relationship with the meaning of stuff at the best of times.
I think it's really fascinating when actually the conversations I have with people where, the first 10 minutes is an explanation of why everything is in their home. I think that no judgment. I think that's interesting information for me to understand the sentimental. They're sort of building up is what we talked about earlier about sometimes when you're in a fearful situation, having your stall laid out. These are the things that I need, and if you're not inexperienced, but if I can pick up the phone and I understand this is what people need to do. I don't take that personally, that they're being very specific. You can't touch that, and we can't touch that, and you can't touch that. I don't take that as being, I'm on the phone going, see, everybody's wasting their time. I absolutely don't. I understand they're laying out their stall. So if I can make sure I'm listening to that properly, I'm looking for where are the, once we've got past those, are there things that we think might be worth having a little look at? No good for me to go straight into the middle of that list and go, well, let's challenge that one.
Yeah.
At the early stages, that's not going to help. It's important to work with what people have already got there. I think sometimes it does outline the work it's going to be challenging for everybody, and that gives me a sense of how we can progress. But it doesn't mean work can't take place. It just means you need to hear people out first.
Something we were talking about before the call was that I recently had a medical procedure that I was very nervous about. I did go in with, we can't do this, I need it to be like this. And that for me made me feel safer and like I was setting boundaries and that felt important. And the fact that she fully respected them all was very meaningful. And like you say, that's not to say that at a later stage, when you've built a relationship with the person, when you've already done some of the work, that you can't start to see whether some of that initial boundary setting was them needing to assert something for this to feel safe, or whether there is actually a bit of wiggle room and working around that.
Precisely, absolutely precisely. Is exactly how I feel. Is that there's a power dynamic at play. They've called, with the professional service, but the idea that that they would feel like they're going to relinquish all sense of control and sense of what the comfort that they've got round them just to invite this stranger in to come and open boxes or whatever it might be. It's very important for some people to I'd be the first to say, in the spirit of honesty, in my early days, I used to find that quite difficult when people would at the door sometimes, especially when it was, social services referrals, for example, where it wasn't necessarily their idea, that the first sort of 20 minutes would be, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do that. Now I'm more experienced. I note them as they're saying, so I'm going to take notes, make sure I understand. And then once they've got through all that, don't challenge that and just come into the point of what we can do. I'm much more at ease with that now, of understanding that that's what the person needs to do to feel safe. But when you are new to it, I would say people feel like they're pushing you out the door, but actually they have opened the door. That is a big deal.
Yeah.
Hear them out and see where you are. And exactly as you say, sometimes there's some wiggle room with that thing, but once you're in the relationship of working with them in a way where they trust you and you're starting to see what's doable for them and what isn't, which might surprise them.
Yes.
Of course, that's joyous is when they surprise themselves. So there are things they could do within their own, at their own pace. That's joyous.
And something that I would be interested to hear from your professional point of view, because I know generally speaking, the advice for non-professionals who want to help somebody who hoards is the advice I always give is to follow that person's lead. And even if you think one thing should be a priority, if they are motivated and prioritizing a different thing, then go with that because that's what they're motivated and prioritizing. Is that a similar thing for you, or as a professional, do you have more of a kind of no, we really should do that first approach?
It's definitely a dance that is important to do, in that I sort of feel that, if it's adult to adult interaction, then and they're investing in your service, then I suppose from a professional point of view, you kind of feel like this is my view of how you're going to get better bang for your bucks. There's no other way of paying it. If you've paid money for us to be there, for example, in my line of work, then I think heading from what you've said, heading for that cupboard, so that because you're not sure what's in there, having a look and then slotting back is going to give you that through way. That's my feeling. But of course, being adult to adult, this is their home. And if there's something they want to test out to get a sense and stretch their decision making muscles, build confidence, do that checking out of the match with you, then we'll do that. So I think there's that sort of dance of where I definitely don't bulldoze people into, yes, we will do that cupboard. And we maybe don't always do do the thing that they've said. Maybe sometimes we're trying to do a bit both, but you get a judge on it depending on the person. So yeah, I think that happens in negotiation,
Yeah.
but it can't be too draconian either way, I don't think.
Yeah, because I guess you feel an ethical responsibility to not let somebody waste money.
Yeah.
And also, as a professional organizer, you have skills and knowledge that somebody like me doesn't have, but equally, this is their home and this is their stuff. And it ultimately, they decide what happens in their home and with their stuff. Anyway, I think I jumped ahead a bit with that question because I know every professional organizer will have their own process, but based on how you work and what you know about how others work, what is the process from making an initial inquiry to actually working with you?
So I think like I say, the first thing is understanding whether they're at the stage for having an in-person visit. And if they are, I do my utmost to see them soon. Because in my experience, if it's taken a while for them to make the call, some clients don't sleep very well until I've been and gone, and I know that. So I try and fit them in as soon as they're happy to.
Or they lose the impetus.
Yeah.
They had the impetus for a week and then no, it's too late now, it's gone again.
Yeah, you give too much time to perhaps the voices that go, well, actually, this is going to be too scary. Go and see them. They've heard my voice. They've been reassured. Go over and see them. But I get a sense that from speaking to people all these years that the phone call, the email contact's been a big deal. The phone contact's been a big deal. The next big hurdle is me arriving at the door. And I need to do that soon so that they can get over that bit, because I know that's a pinch point for whether they're going to go any further or not. So if they can have me across the threshold, specifically because I know this is the point where I'm going to see the challenges they've got at home, and that's the bit that frightens people often, is actually seeing it. Plus, I always say to the people on the phone, you're still absolutely in control of this process when I'm at your door, okay? And it's your chance to check me out
Of course.
and to see if I'm the right fit for you. Everything you say and do is going to be confidential, but it's your chance to ask me all the questions you want to have and just make sure I'm the right fit for you, so that it takes the emphasis off the fact that I'm coming along to have a beady little look at your home. I need everybody to know that is going to be okay, and that I'm really getting an idea of how I can shape a project that's going to best suit you and come up with a proposal that's going to best suit you and what you would like to see happen at pace that suits you. So that seems to take the heat out of the situation. But yeah, ringing the doorbell, I know that that's a big hurdle for people.
If you want to get even more from me, I have a weekly newsletter that goes out to email subscribers. As a bonus, when you sign up, you get a printable version of a series of questions to help you make decisions when you're dehoarding. Sign up for all of that for free at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/newsletter. And so if we get to that point, you're coming to someone's home, they might not have had anyone in there for years. They might fear judgment or criticism. And as kind of potentially that person, I would be imagining everything that you might be thinking. So as you enter someone's home for the first time and see their stuff, their surroundings, what is happening in your mind?
So I think, again, it takes quite an approach to have, where it's important, again, that I'm not rushing to that meeting, I am not rushing off from that meeting, that I'm in good headspace when I get there, because I cannot be overwhelmed by what I'm seeing. That's absolutely, I can't be. This is somebody's home, this is somebody's living there, and I need to understand the sort of interaction between the two. So, I'll ask, really normal questions like, how long have you lived here? How do you find the area? All that sort of thing, just sort of general chit chat. I mean, a lot of those conversations happen once the door's closed as well, because I'm very conscious of the fact that people are often nervous about having any conversations at the doorstep, but I don't force myself in. I sort of see if they're happy for me stepping into the home. So a lot of that, I mean, we were talking before about, people we're making those judgments and that little dance with each other at the doorstep by looking at each other's faces, and to see that person and ascertain which bits they're nervous about in their way, and they need to be reassured by me genuinely and not feel like I'm coming in, or I'm going to have conversations out here where all your neighbours can hear us. So it's reading that and coming in at a pace that's appropriate. Maybe there's a pet that needs to be greeted, do things, like you're going into somebody's home to say hello. It's important at that stage that I'm just understanding their own interaction with their home. So, I mean, obviously, I've been doing this for years, so there's no amount of belongings that phases me. And because I'm a professional, I won't be overwhelmed because I don't, it's not as if I'm empathic to this person, but it's, when you talk about people talk about friends and relatives coming in and it just makes them so upset or angry or however they're going to be, they're just overwhelmed by it because they want things to be different for that person. I want things to be different from it, but I am not yet in that, I'm not in that close relationship with the person. So I can see it from a slightly more neutral point of view. What is this person struggling to do day to day that they're telling me? And what do I think they're struggling with day to day that they're not telling me? And where are the sort of places of movement? So yeah, it's getting that interplay in my mind as we're walking around.
And as well as this kind of, you're building this relationship with a person and trying to ask the right questions without being pushy, but still glean the information you want. Are you also, is your mind also doing like strategic things looking at this stuff? Are you already thinking, oh, we could maybe do this and that, or are you not at that stage yet?
Yeah, because there's lots of things I can't do, but I have a have a superhero quality where I don't know if you've ever seen the Lego movie where
No.
they it's where they can see all the different pieces and they can see how it would come together. And I've got that with spaces. But crucially, the bit of information that I'm understanding is simplistically put, what's in that cupboard at the back there, do you think? And understanding whether they know exactly what's in there or whether they don't know what's in there or whether it possibly might not have anything in there. We don't know yet, but getting a sense of how the space could say, for example, I presume, and I think this is a useful thing for people to understand with our service. I presume, what could we do with this space if the person cannot actually let anything go? And I think this is quite an eye opener for people because they presume that I'm going, right, how do I coerce this person to get rid of two-thirds of their belongings?
Yeah.
And that is not what I am thinking. I'm thinking, I wonder if there's a way that we could reorganize in a way that would allow them to keep all their belongings, but in a way that still allowed them to access the bedroom a bit easier or not show home setup, but be able to make life a bit easier for them. And I think they get that vibe from if I'm tuning into what they find difficult and what might make life easier for them, then they can be more honest in their replies about, yeah, I'm not sure what's in that cupboard, or that might, if they know exactly what's in that cupboard and they can list it, then that's a useful thing for me to know as well in terms of their memory and even if they do know what's in there, understanding whether it can be sifted or sorted or maximized in any particular way. What I meant by that comment as well about if there are things that they're not saying look tricky. So if they're not, if the client's not able to sleep in their own bed but hasn't mentioned it, I can ask the question. But sometimes there's other reasons why people are not sleeping in their bedrooms other than stuff. And I think it's really useful for people to understand that we get that. We understand that you might feel more comfortable in the lounge, you might feel safer in the lounge. And bedroom is more of a store. Okay, if bedroom's more of a store, should we make it a more efficient store for you? So finding those steps forward without judgment. But no, we are not going in going, yeah, three-quarters of this has got to go. And how am I going to make this person do that?
Yeah. Again, when I had that medical procedure recently, I hadn't realized until I was in there how much I was scrutinizing this woman's face, the nurse who was going to do the procedure. I felt like one of those FBI micro expressions people. I would say kind of, it's important to me that we do it like this. And then I would be scrutinizing, was there a hint of judgment in her face? Was there a hint of annoyance in her face? And I assume, and I know that if I was to invite a professional organizer in here, I would also, yeah, like, I wouldn't be planning to do that. I wouldn't even like that I was doing that, but I would be the minute I open my front door, I would be looking at those tiny reactions. Like, I wouldn't expect you to go, "Oh my God, this is disgusting." But I would be looking for something in your face that said that. Presumably, first of all, that's not just me. And secondly, that's something you're conscious of.
Mm. I think this is the amazing thing that we understand that if somebody's fearful, if they're worried, then that's an evolutionary trait we're really blessed with. We are looking for the small cues that we are in increased danger. We're on high alert. Yeah, we're on high alert. And I'm very conscious of that. There is again the dance where if something isn't, if I say something that is because I'm sympathetic to the person's circumstance, but I feel like it wasn't the right thing to say, I will correct myself. It's important because I know it at the moment I've sort of said it. So okay, what I meant was, and it's important that you understand, because I think this looks difficult for you, but you tell me more. So again, it's about understanding that, yeah, that person's on high alert. They are looking to you as a professional or the person that's in their home, not to be putting them in increased danger. But I am a human being.
Yeah.
I haven't got a script and I'm trying to read the situation as I find it. And I think if we're honest in that rapport, then it really shows and the person is more comfortable going around with you. But yeah, reading those small cues is vital, which is why I always sort of say that this is very different work to some other forms of professional organisation work, where it's solidly on the logistics of what's going in and out and what's being moved. It is very much in the psychological aspect of being not overstating its therapeutic sort of input, but that it's a much more relationship based, trust based activity that's about the person and what changes they're ready to make and working with that. And sometimes you have to ascertain what changes they're ready to make with their sort of non-verbal cues more than what they actually say. So we're both doing it to each other at the same time.
Yeah. I'm going to suspect that at least some people listening are thinking, what if I called a professional organizer and we had the first call and it sounded great and then they came to my home? What if they just said, "Oh no, this is an absolute lost cause. There's nothing I can do"? Are there any circumstances where there's too much stuff, or where you just would feel like the responsible thing to do would be to not help? How does that kind of work?
I think that's a really interesting and very, insightful question to ask because it's never, well, I don't say never. There's some circumstances which not plain sailing. I've definitely had conversations with people at the door where I've said, I think that you're at the moment going to find this process much more painful than the trade-off for what it's going to gain for you. And I think that that's not you're a lost cause. I can ascertain if the work is just going to be so hard for them. And, maybe unpack a little bit. But I said, that's just we've just had, half an hour, 40 minutes in each other's company. This is my feeling. But, we can come back to a conversation perhaps further down the line. People are not lost cause because there's too much stuff or that it's because the interaction between their stuff and themselves is not at the point where, like I said at the start, it may well be that they've got the vision for what they want it to be, but that when you start really looking at the actual physical work, you can tell that it's going to be too much for them. You've got a set. Well, you've got a sense. I don't know for sure. I don't know for sure. I've got a sense that it might be too much for them, or that they can do a little bit of the work, but still are doing it because they're being shamed to do it, but actually aren't sold on what it will do for them.
Yeah.
I get a sense then that they might make their way through 2 hours of sorting and they won't see the benefits and they won't it won't carry them through that painful process. So that, we've definitely had those conversations. Thankfully, rarely. Usually there's some way forward that gives a tangible outcome for the person, especially if they've gone to that sort of length. I don't want to disappoint people, but usually the people I've had those conversations with, they are people for whom somebody else had the idea that they should go to have somebody over, and they're just not at the place yet for that to translate into having somebody in to start working with them to make any changes.
There will, as you reference there will be times when somebody is asking for help for reasons that do not come from I want help. Maybe the landlord, is pressuring, maybe whatever. Maybe they're about to have a baby or any of these different circumstances. How does that process work with you if you know, maybe it's even been stated, this isn't necessarily what I would be doing, but I kind of have no choice? Is that something you can still support people with, and how does that look different if so?
Again, I think it's a dance in that for some people you get a sense that, okay, there might be in that a reason that actually we do have to have a tangible outcome because the result is of critical importance to them, or critical importance, and it's dawning on them that it's going to be something that they have to engage with even if they don't want to. But really starting small. I suppose what I'm always afraid of is that ploughing on regardless. I suppose that's what I'm trying to get at. Ploughing on regardless of how ready somebody is to make changes, in my experience, just puts people off the process altogether. And no matter how urgent the situation is, and I'm caught in getting the balance there because I don't want people to fall into a crisis situation. I also don't want them to decide that they're never going to have support ever again because it was just too painful. So getting the balance right is again why we're both checking each other out in that consultation to work out where the movement might be. I don't want them to, it's not going to be an easy time, but I don't want them to have such a terrible time that they never pick up the phone again.
Yeah, you don't want it to just be associated with, God, that was awful when I had to do that with
Yeah.
Jasmine. You don't want that to be the association with asking for help. And I would imagine from your point of view, it would be a trickier process to work with in the first place, but equally compared to being evicted, it's a balance, isn't it? How do you Yeah, you have to work that out. And also with the person who doesn't want to be evicted while also not wanting to do this and trying to work it out between you.
It's the worst of all worlds where somebody's not quite ready, but circumstances has come in where they have to make changes from a fear point of view. So we're talking potential eviction or something like that, because it's all the worst, all the worst fearfuls. With something that's very much an anxiety disorder. So it's all that fear in place is never is going to just making decisions, obviously affecting executive decision making, and just engaging the process really tricky. But again, if we can find some way forward, then and at the end of those couple of hours, they've achieved something they couldn't do on their own and they feel quite pleased about. And it's like all things, isn't it? That's what will keep them try again another time because there's no one hit wonder. It's about that relationship building and chipping away. But I need them to have the hit in the first session of something winning for them.
Yeah. They can use the fridge again,
Yes, something.
or they can have a bath again, or
Yeah.
something that makes them go, oh, thank goodness about it.
And celebrated for the person that's been in with them. I think that's for me that I was reading something the other day and it said people always think that the bin bags and the clear space is the outcome of what we do, and it's not. It's the feeling that that person has that they've achieved something, they've taken control of something in their home, that feedback for them so that they will do it again or something they thought was really, well, they thought it was going to be really tricky, they've overcome it. It's all that psychological stuff we read about all the time. They'll come back to it again. That is the win for us. That's the real benefit for the person. And that's what I'm saying. If I don't think that person's going to feel comfort from the outcome or from the dopamine hit, if you like, of making it past that tricky part of the process, then it won't carry them through the 2 hours. So we need to have a clear view that that's going to be something that's achievable for them.
I enjoy making this podcast and it helps me on a personal level. It's a lot of work, but the feedback I get makes it worthwhile. I fund everything about the podcast myself. So if you want to help to ensure the future of the podcast, you can help me to cover the costs by sending a one-off or recurring donation at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/donate. You mentioned earlier that when you make the first call and meet a person for the first time, they are assessing you as well. Are we a good fit? Sometimes people are not a good fit, not because of anything being wrong with them, just like the person who might be my perfect therapist might be your worst therapist, and it doesn't make them a good or bad one. It's a fit thing. And something I know from having interviewed therapists and other professional organisers on the podcast as well is that there's often a bit of a network. Like a therapist will have a go-to professional organiser that they recommend, for instance. So if somebody met you and it kind of all worked out, but you didn't really click, is it done that you might say, you know who I think would be brilliant for you? Jill. Or does that happen?
Yes, it does. Yeah. I mean, thankfully, now that professional organising is increasing in, its coverage, because obviously I'm down in Devon, and when I set out 12 years ago, I think I was one of 4 for the whole peninsula. So actually, it was quite problematic if people didn't get on well with me. Also, if they didn't get on well with me, I didn't have a team then where I could go, actually, when I'm going around with somebody, I think you'd be a really good fit for this member of my team. All of my team are great, but they're all sort of ever so slightly different focus, which I think is brilliant. And I like that. Now I can definitely say there's this person only 15, 20 miles away who I think's going to be a good fit for you, but try see what they're like. I mean, what they want often reassurance is that 3/4 of what we're offering there is exactly this, obviously is exactly the same. Well, more than that, actually. 90% of what we're offering is exactly the same. The 10% is just this little bit of temperament difference often. And I tell you what it is, it's so vital doing this work that you're just not chasing work for the sake of work. If you're motivated by wanting to see good things happen for people, and don't get me wrong, it has to be viable. But that's for me been the real benefit of experience, is if you're motivated by getting a good result for people, then you're open-minded about actually offering people different solutions that are not necessarily you. And I've definitely gone and seen people for a couple of hours and come out and said, I think that this is about a different sort of service, maybe not even professional, but a different sort of service to do X, Y, and Z, to have you ready for what you want to do. Not because I don't want to do it, but just because I think that's the right outcome for the person. And I still leave those homes feeling much more satisfied than if I, again, tried to, bulldoze our way through when I knew it wasn't the right fit. So yeah, definitely we sometimes have those conversations. And again, people really appreciate the honesty.
I would. And if you're going to be spending 2 hours, 4 hours with somebody doing something that they find, potentially immensely painful and triggering and traumatic even, you want that person to be someone. Some people would want someone who will make jokes periodically to lighten the mood. For other people, that would be the worst thing. Some people want someone to be a little bit, not quite pushy, but urgy. And for other people, that would be a danger sign. And so I think, like you say, now that there are more professional organisers around, it feels like it must be more feasible to get that good fit.
It is definitely much more feasible to get that right fit. And as again, the balancing act would be for a sense of reflection about whether it's because you're just getting to know each other, because in 2 hours maybe there's a bit of shifting and
Yeah.
and finding. I've definitely been at sessions with one of my team, and in that first session I've just thought, oh, that dynamic, it's not quite fitted there, right? But actually most of it's there. Give them a second go, particularly if I know that that client's maybe had a few organisers, maybe had organisers before. I just want to make sure it evolves naturally to be a good fit, or whether there's a entrenched sort of more a movable sort of mismatch. And also making sure for the client it doesn't become, they're not mistaking the pain of the process with the person being there.
Yes.
So it is, again, it's a judgment on the subtleties really of what is possible. And again, having that adult to adult conversation. If clients come to me and say, I found that the session with that person a bit difficult, we just try and unpack it a little bit without taking it personally. And that is, it's hard not to take it personally, but
Of course.
without taking it personally, we have to acknowledge the fact that, yeah, there might be some things that are not able to be resolved as easily, and maybe there's a way of making things, the process, go better for them with somebody else. The thing is, I always feel like in balance, they've got to go through that difficult process of getting to know somebody else. So there's no easy answer on that one, but there's certainly more options than there used to be.
Yeah. Yeah. In your own life, what is one habit or practice that has either improved or helped you to maintain your own mental health?
Really interesting one. I mean, there's all the obvious ones, which is
The obvious ones are good.
making sure I get plenty of sleep is, it seems to be essential. Honestly, anyone who's had a few nights not sleeping has a good insight to working with clients for whom a good night, a clear night's many hours of sleep is a rarity. You can see how it really affects every part of their lives. So I'm lucky that I do get good sleep, but I do love to read. And I sometimes have to make myself read,
I'm the same.
even though I enjoy reading.
I'm exactly the same.
And even as I see myself doing it, putting my book there, but doing many, many other things before, I find that an interesting bit of psychology of myself, having spent all day trying to convince people to engage with things that are joyous for them and interesting and better for their well-being. That sounds judgy, but they've said themselves that would make them feel better. And yet here we are, self-sabotaging, finding all the other things to do rather than the thing that you enjoy. And so I find that, so I suppose reading, yes, but I absolutely find it fascinating the days that I've kept my book by the bed and have not picked it up. What's going on there?
Especially if you've spent all day going, oh, I can't wait to get back to the book. And you still don't. I'm exactly the same. I love reading, and yet the hoops I have to jump through to make myself do it sometimes.
It's so absorbing. It's the complete opposite to scrolling on my phone and chores and all the other things. It's and in my own mind, I know it's sort of part of it is, I feel it's very selfish to sit there and just, luxuriate in being immersed in a different story. But that's really interesting, isn't it? Having spent, like I say, all day trying to assist people to. So yeah, I find it fascinating. But yeah, a good book, and then I feel much better myself when I've got a good book on the go.
Yeah. Yeah. How are you with endings of good books? I sometimes feel bereft. If a book was especially good and then it has to disappear from my brain, I'm not daily engaging with the characters. I feel bereft.
It's very different to any other medium, I think, because it so lives in your brain. I mean, bear in mind that I'm getting to the sort of age as well where it's entirely possible for me to go back to a book 6 months later and read it almost afresh.
Yeah, yeah. So I have an extra question that I ask guests. This is the bit where I ask guests an extra question. It's sometimes a slightly silly one. And Dehoarding Darlings get access to this extra question and the answer. If you would like to become a Dehoarding Darling, go to overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/darling. So, Jasmine, thank you so much. I think that's certainly given me, and no doubt listeners, a real insight into, first of all, the experience of being asked for help as a professional, and also a reflection of the different ways people do ask, the different things they might be going through when they do, and how that experience can play out. I think the point that you feel as kind of proud of this person for being so brave as I might is a really important one to drive home, that you're not doing this job because you want to be judgmental about people. You're doing this job because you want to help people, and you appreciate how hard that first call is so much that it sounds like, just never take for granted that somebody's got that far.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to speak. It's always lovely chatting with you.
And if people want to find you online or find your book, social media, anything like that, where can they do so?
There's lots and lots of info and free resources on my website, which is Change Your Space. So changeYourSpace.co.uk. There's information about my book there. I've got a little YouTube channel signposted from there. So you can have a good look at me feeling most uncomfortable behind a camera. It's always worth a look. But yeah, I would point people towards the website for anything they want to find out about it, what we do, and anything else they want to find out from the site there.
Amazing. Thank you, Jasmine.
Thank you.
It's the bit where that hoarder shouts out someone wise.
Shout out this week to the Declutter Hub podcast. I listened to this episode this morning, and this idea has genuinely helped me literally today. Have a listen.
One of the things that we talk about all the time is, we often live in the past and for the future. So what we mean by that is we keep things from the past sentimentally, we keep things for the future, definitely just in case. But what we truly need to embrace, and why we don't need just in case items, is our current lifestyle. The vast majority of things in our home need to be for today, need to be used, loved, needed, on a daily basis or a weekly basis. We can't just keep things for no good reason just because we think they're going to come in at some point, right?
I know. And I think that can really keep people stuck, right? Because they always wonder, well, and you never know when I might need it one day. And it's like, yeah, but hold on. You want to have the stuff in your house that fits in your current lifestyle, that fits with the current you, that fits with the current state of your family and the people that are around you and the place where you live.
When Leslie said the majority of things around you should be things that you use now, that really hit something in me. I think she's right. Okay, thank you for listening, and I will speak to you next time. Thank you for listening to That Hoarder Overcome Compulsive Hoarding podcast. It's been a pleasure to have you on board. You can find all the links I've mentioned and a transcript of the episode online at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk. To find out more about how you can support this podcast and the overall project, Go to overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/support and do subscribe to the podcast so you make sure you don't miss any future episodes. There may be links in this podcast that earn me money. This doesn't come at any extra cost to you if you make a purchase through those links, and it helps to support the podcast. So I am here with Jasmine Sleigh, owner. That's a great start. Fail within a sentence.